Okay, a big thank you, Manfred, and it's I'm really delighted to be here, and it's not very often I get the opportunity to do two talks. So let's let's fire up my slides here. Get this right this time. There you go. Right, good. Right, are we good? Can everyone see that?
We are good.
You good, Manfred? Okay. So the title of this talk is "We Are Not Enemies but Friends," and the exact meaning of that will emerge during my session. I'm just, those of you who were here for the earlier session, I will have gone through this already, but for those who haven't, I've been working in the KM field for 25, if not 30 years or so. I'm pretty much best known for my knowledge cafes that I've been running for the last 18 years, run hundreds of them around the globe. And I think in that time really started to appreciate the quite extraordinary power of conversation. And today I'm researching and writing a book. It's that's not a typo. A book is a cross between a blog and an online book on conversational leadership, which I've just been talking about. And that's essentially taking a more conversational approach to the way that we work. And today I'm spending a lot of my time researching and writing that book, and giving talks like these. So that's a little bit about myself. Again, I'm not aiming to fill your minds full of stuff here. I'm aiming to kindle some interest, to kindle a fire maybe. So that's my intent. Everything I talk about, you will find much more in my book. This is the homepage of my book. It's conversationalleadership.net. It's more than just a book. You will find, if you look at the top of the screen there, there's a resource item on the menu. You will find book reviews. You will find profiles of people. You will find videos. You will find quotations and a lot more. Because the book again isn't just about me. There's a lot of material that I link to, or that I embed in the book. So if you're interested, this is the place to go look. Right, so let's get into the essence of what I want to talk about. And it starts with this issue, this problem that seems to have, I know, surfaced in some ways just this last year or two, in the fact that we seem to be a much more polarized society than we have ever been, and across a wide variety of divides. And we've only got to look at America right now. We've only got to look, sadly to say, at things like Brexit. There's just a lot of polarization. And the problem with polarization is that we're starting to see people with different beliefs as enemies, to be defeated, I say it, and at times even killed. And a lot of people seem to think that the end justifies the means. And so in some ways, maybe to some degree, there's less kinetic warfare in the world, but there's a lot more information warfare, whether it's derogatory comments, lying, deceit, fake news, and the like. And again, we're seeing just so much of this last few years. What interests me is that I think all of us have experienced social media and realized the lack of respect and the lack of any really constructive argument taking place on social media. But the other day, I just went to some of the mainstream media to try to find really anything that was reasonably balanced and not disrespectful in any way. And I had a great deal of problem in actually finding such media outlets, and everything does seem to be tribal. Everything does seem to be somewhat polarized. Clearly, this is not good. So the question I've had in my mind for a little while is, why are we as polarized as we are? Why are our views formed the way that they are? And people often talk about the fact that we need to give people better evidence, need to give people more information. People maybe need to be educated in critical thinking. And the interesting thing about that, and I don't have time to go into it in detail, is the fact that most of those methods don't work. So there's something here that we need to better understand, something about our own human psychology that we need to better understand if we're going to make any sense of this. Part of it is filter bubbles, so-called filter bubbles, things called epistemic bubbles and echo chambers that we're familiar with. The way that our social media is distorting the world. I think that's a small part of it. It's part of it that I don't want to particularly look at in this talk, but I've written about it in my book. What I want to look at in particular is how we form our beliefs, because I think this is at the heart of the problem. And let me just take you through the. Well, it's not really my thinking. It's just some of the psychological research that's gone on around this issue. So if I asked you if the Earth orbited the Sun, or the Sun orbited the Earth, I hope you would tell me that the Earth orbited the Sun. It seems like 45% of Americans, I'm not so sure about Europeans, actually reckon it's the other way around. But the question for you is, how do you know that? Could you prove it to me? Well, I've got a degree in physics, and I'm not too sure I could prove it to you. It actually flies in the face of our direct experience. We see the Earth rise we see the Sun rise in the east, set in the west, and we've certainly got no experience as such of the Earth spinning. The reason that we believe that the Earth orbits the Sun is because somebody told us. A teacher, a parent, a book, somebody in authority who we trusted told us, probably in our childhood, that the Earth orbited the Sun, and we accepted it. So that's the way that we think that we know it. Yes, it's based on who we trust. Just bring that a little bit closer to home. What does Greta Thunberg know about climate change? No. All due respect to Greta Thunberg, I think she's doing an amazing job. She knows diddly squat. She knows nothing about climate change. But then neither do you or I. None of us really, unless you're a climate scientist, we don't know anything about climate change. Has Greta or many of us actually read the scientific papers? And if we read them, could we understand them anyway? We don't know anything about climate change, or very little about climate change. Greta, for example, and I hope all of us here, or most of us here, trust the scientific community when they say it's real. So Greta trusts the scientific community. Donald Trump, for example, clearly doesn't trust the scientific community. So it's not about necessarily knowing, it's about who we trust, which I think is a very interesting insight. And this book, from probably about 3 years ago now, The Knowledge Illusion, although I tend to call it the knowledge delusion, was written by two cognitive scientists in America, Stephen Sloman and Philip Fernbach, who look at this issue and a whole lot of other issues about how we form our beliefs. And there's nothing terribly rational about the way we form our beliefs. I think somewhere in the book they refer to the fact that we are not rational creatures, we are rationalizing creatures. Our beliefs get set down probably in childhood and early age, and then later in life we look for evidence to support them, not for evidence to question them. And what I want to do here is share a little video with you of Philip Fernbach there talking about just this issue. So let's play the video for you.
Now, the real tragedy occurs in how we relate to people who have different beliefs than us. We live in the illusion that we have arrived at our own positions via a serious analysis, and that we can support and justify what we believe based on what we know. Therefore, when someone doesn't believe what we believe, it's obvious what the problem is. They're too stupid to see the truth. And there's actually a sense in which you're right when you think that. It's true. They did not arrive at their position via a rational process of evidence evaluation. And they don't understand the issue in depth. But neither do you. Think about how we talk about a complex issue like healthcare. If you're a liberal, the Affordable Care Act is the bee's knees. If you're a conservative, it's destroying America. But most of the time, arguments about the policy's merits amount to little more than repetition of sound bites that we heard from someone else. As non-experts, we can't possibly do justice to the complexity of an issue like that. When we express our beliefs, we are all just channeling our communities of knowledge. That's what we do. Knowledge is not in my head, and it's not in your head. Knowledge is shared, and therefore, the things that you really care about, those things are shared too. Now, the point is decidedly not that people are stupid. It's true, we are all ignorant, but that's not something we should hide from. The world is far too complex for any one of us to understand much of it. What makes us special is the ability to thrive amidst that complexity by sharing knowledge. From our individual ignorance can arise collective genius. Ignorance is a feature.
Do you like that? Ignorance is a feature. Seems to me what he's talking about here is right at the heart of knowledge management, but that's maybe another story. Just trying to summarize this a little. The point I'm trying to make here is that we know far less than we think we do. In fact, in reality, if you stop and reflect on it, each and every one of us knows precious little, yes? Through our direct experience. Most of it has been learned from books, it comes from people, as I say, that we trust. Our beliefs are not based on evidence. This is the key point. Despite our ignorance, as Philip pointed out there, we argue and fight over our beliefs. Despite our ignorance, we argue and fight over our beliefs, as if we're in the right. Yeah? So, to me, recognizing the shakiness of our beliefs, the ground that they're based on, is the very first step in not seeing people with beliefs that are different to us as stupid or as our enemies. I think that's maybe a big challenge, but if we can start to do this, then just maybe we can move forward. So, talking about moving forward, how based on what I presented so far, how do we move forward? Now, for me, what we need to do here is start to learn to engage in constructive conversation, across all the divides I've talked about before. And these are clearly very difficult, extremely difficult conversations to have. So much so that they often get called impossible conversations. It's not that they're totally impossible, it's just that they are extremely difficult. And I use this term a lot. I quite like it because it does sort of underscore the gravity of the problem. An impossible conversation is one on a controversial or emotive topic that feels futile because it takes place between people who hold radically different views. Yeah, these are the conversations that I think we need to start to learn to have. Whoops. So, what's been interesting me really this last 6 months is how do we hold these difficult, seemingly impossible conversations? And I kind of come to the conclusion that we need to, that there are maybe 7 prerequisites, 7 things that we need to accept before we can even start to have those conversations. And I want to take you just briefly through those 7 points. So we've covered this first one. We need to recognize that our beliefs rest on shaky ground. Many of you will be familiar with the work of Daniel Kahneman and his book from a few years back, Thinking Fast and Slow. Just reiterating what we were saying earlier, really, considering how little we know, the confidence we have in our beliefs is preposterous. Yeah, don't need to labour that. We need to cease seeing ourselves as enemies. If we can do that, then that's a big step forward. And I have a nice little video clip here. You'll recognize this gentleman. Interestingly, he gave this little talk immediately after the last presidential election in the States, when Trump came to power. This was a little YouTube talk that he gave. And let me share it with you because it's a quotation from President Lincoln's first inaugural address. Okay?
Here we go. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart in hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the course of our union when again touched, as surely they will be by the better angels of our nature. Isn't it wonderful? I love this quote.
I love that quote too. It's very relevant, and that's where clearly the title of this talk came from. We also need to be ready, not just to talk, we need to be ready to talk with people whom we disagree. And got another little video clip here for you from another well-known personage, Oprah Winfrey. Let's play the talk.
And even though this is the college where Facebook was born, my hope is that you will try to go out and have more face-to-face conversations with people you may disagree with. That you'll have the courage to look them in the eye and hear their point of view, and help make sure that the speed and distance and anonymity of our world doesn't cause us to lose our ability to stand in somebody else's shoes and recognize all that we share as a people. This is imperative for you as an individual and for our success as a nation. There has to be some way that this darkness can be banished with light.
There must be some way that this can be banished with light. I like those words, and okay, both our speakers there were referring to America, but this is not just America. This is a global phenomenon. Okay, so not only do we need to be able to talk to people with different opinions, I think another part of this is we need to be able to talk in good faith. And I realize that not everyone understands, I don't know how this translates in German, but in English, good faith is the intent to be sincere, to be fair, to be open, honest, regardless of the outcome, typically of the conversation. So we're not talking about manipulative conversations where there are hidden agendas. We're talking about conversations where both parties are looking as best they can to make sense of the world and to get at some sort of truth. So we need to talk in good faith. This is one, respect is one that I've long thought about and struggled with. And it's only relatively recently that I've come to realize that there are two aspects, if you like, to the word respect. You can have respect for a person, and you can show respect to or for a person. And those two terms mean something really quite different. If you have respect for someone, you have a certain admiration for them, for their abilities, for their achievements, yes? But showing respect is a little bit different. That's about showing due regard for their feelings. So for me, it's possible not to respect someone, not to respect the person themselves, not to respect their views or their ideas, but nevertheless still show them respect, to still have due regard for their feelings and wishes. Yeah. So to me, this is a key difference. And I've written quite a bit about this in my book. And one of the things that I came across in doing a little bit of research was a Jewish religious term called lashon hara. And it's a very interesting term. I think it means evil tongue, something like that. And it's a term for derogatory speech about a person. And it seems in the Jewish religious tradition, it's considered a serious sin to speak lashon hara. But the key thing here is, even if it's true, it's a sin to say something derogatory about somebody, even if it's true. And so this is maybe sort of the gold standard in showing somebody respect. And I really do love the concept, and there's a lot written about it, and I've written a bit about it in my book. And a lot that's been written is about the challenge of actually doing it. If you think about it, it's very difficult. If you were a newspaper reporter, to not write something derogatory about a politician, it's got to be a rather difficult thing to do. But something I've taken on personally is I keep that term in my head. It's an interesting kind of label for it. And so whenever I find myself saying anything derogatory about anybody, even if it's true, in my head, in my mind, I say, David, do you really need to do this? Do you need to be so disrespectful of them? Do you need to be, so derogatory? And most of the time, the answer is no. And so I try not to do it. I'm not perfect. I end up doing it all the time. But now I'm a lot more aware of it. I try my damnedest to show respect for everyone and show respect for their views, because we've got to talk to people across divides. And so I think a big part of this is respect. Okay? So, wait. Almost there. Talked about this with Manfred in the early session about, if you're going to have an impossible conversation, a bit like a sport, if you like, you need some rules of engagement. Because without those rules, it's going to be a bit of a free-for-all. You're going to end up fighting. And I worked with a friend, a guy called David Creelman in Toronto, and we tried to put together a set of rules, a set of principles that a small group of people could agree to abide by, to engage in difficult conversations. And the purpose of, what we called a conversation covenant was not so much to ensure, say, a good conversation, but we wanted to create a psychologically safe space for a conversation where people weren't afraid to speak up, where people weren't afraid to be challenged. And although we kind of wrote it thinking in terms of a largest group having conversations, it could simply be a commitment to yourself. And what I want to do now is just share some of those rules with you. We actually came up with 14 rules. I think it's probably a good 7 too many, and there's almost certainly a few there that are missing, a few that are missing. But if you look at them, you'll get an idea as to what we were trying to do, and you'll see some of them I've already talked about. So acting in good faith, showing respect, not talking behind someone's back, speaking the truth, following the covenant even when others fail to do so, taking responsibility for the conversation. So none of these are necessarily about having a good conversation, although hopefully they would lead to that. These are all about creating a safe space. And we haven't had a chance to do any sort of experiment with this, but this is some thinking that's only a month or two old. So we've got this concept of the conversation covenant, and I think whatever we do, we need something like that. It can be something much simpler, but we need to agree some conversational rules, if you will. And now I'd like to introduce you to this gentleman, or this particular gentleman. It's a gentleman called Peter Bakassian, and he, with a colleague called James Lindsay, wrote this book it was published just a few months ago. a practical guide to having impossible conversations. And I've got a little video clip of Peter sharing, I think, three tips as to how to have impossible conversations. The book's quite an amazing book. There's a lot of detail in the book. It really is a very practical guide. And there's some like, I think the first tip Peter gives here in the video is one that I had never thought of in the past, and I think it's an incredibly powerful one. So listen to what Peter's got to say, okay?
I'm Peter Boghossian, and I'm an expert on having impossible conversations. I'm going to share 3 simple techniques you should incorporate to ensure your conversations are productive. Sometimes arguments are presented as black and white, and you get lost in a yes it is, no it isn't spiral. Here's something small you can do to add perspective and have a productive conversation. Introduce scales. Simply ask, on a scale from 1 to 10, how confident are you that belief is true? This lets you know how entrenched someone is in their position. You can also ask for scales on an issue. For example, you may have heard America is a patriarchy and then found this statement bizarre. That comment usually initiates a no it isn't, yes it is argument. You can escape this yes-no dead end by introducing a scale. Ask, how much of a patriarchy? Suppose Saudi Arabia is 9 out of 10 in patriarchy. Where is the US on the same scale? Asking for a scale helps break away from all or nothing thinking. It also gives room for people to move along that scale without giving up their position entirely. And if either position moves toward the other, you know your conversation wasn't meaningless. When we argue, we're asked, often angrily or dismissively, for evidence of our claims. But it's rare to ask, what evidence might actually change your mind? This question isn't a threat, and you're not telling anyone anything. You're just inviting someone to question their own beliefs in a non-threatening way. Here's how you do it. First, state their position in a way that enthusiastically agree. This will ensure you're on the same page. Then ask a disconfirmation question. Ask, how could that belief be wrong? I'm not saying it is wrong, but under what conditions would you change your mind? Now you're in a Asking the disconfirmation question is a good faith way of giving people the space to consider and self-critique their position. Who knows? You both may find some common ground or learn something. People often confuse the ability to know something with actually knowing something. This phenomenon is known as the unread library effect. In 2001, researchers asked people to rate their confidence about how toilets work. Participants were then asked to explain verbally and give as much detail as possible. Then they rated their confidence again. And you guessed it, this time subjects admitted to being far less confident. We can access the library, but we don't know anything unless we borrow and read the book. It's okay to not know everything, but our confidence should scale with our actual knowledge. Here's how you can use this in conversation. Start by admitting you don't know enough to hold a firm position and ask for explanations in as much detail as possible. You might ask, what do you think? How do you know that? If your partner is an expert, you might both be rewarded with a good lesson. Otherwise, you might both learn that you need to learn more. Improving our conversations is vital because it enables us to solve shared problems. We have some very serious problems that we need to be talking about and generating solutions to, but unless we're having conversations, that's impossible.
Okay, get the idea. I think 3 really, really good tips there. I'd highly recommend the book. There's a lot more in the book. Okay. Right, so just drawing to a close, pretty much on time. Just want to summarize, if you like, the messages from my talk here. And I think the first thing is to recognize that as individuals, we know very little, and we end up arguing and fighting out of ignorance, and recognizing the fact that human knowledge is communal, that our knowledge, but very little knowledge exists in our individual minds. It's in other people's minds. And if we do that, we start to realize that each and every one of us hold, in terms of making sense of the world, we hold different pieces of the jigsaw, and that we do actually need each other to make sense of the world. Yeah, we are not enemies, but friends. So part of my mission is to try to help us start to engage in these so-called impossible conversations. And if you want to know more, I'm writing a lot more about this, again, in my book. Go take a look. So, Manfred, I'll stop
Thank
there.
you, David.
And
Thank
I'll
you
take a few
again.
questions.
It's a wonderful presentation again. Probably we drop the presentation, so we have a little bit more space for the videos of our attendees, and we can see the hands raised. David, if you switch off your presentation, probably that is helping us to support a dialogue and to match not what is the word? Not friends, yeah, in discussion. Die Zeit, a German paper, a major newspaper, was doing a large initiative last year, and they really set up in every city people with different political opinions from the left and the right and other spectrum. So this is actually what I learned from this and can relate to it. Let's check for our team, for our group. What did you learn and what are your questions to David? Just go for it. Use the time. Franziska.
Yes, of course. I'm very interested in how you see the possibility to make a connection between the young school kids and also, yes, the older ones who has a lot of energy and experience in life, and how can we connect them? Because I think what I've learned in the last month, actually very fresh learnings, it's very hard to get the attention of the school kids. So I think the bottleneck is the attention and how we can have a really good conversation. Do you have any ideas what to do?
I was asked a similar question in the first session, and I introduced people to the concept of oracy, which is a word that I only discovered last year. When we talk about education, we talk about numeracy and literacy and the importance of those two abilities, but we never talk about oracy. So numeracy, numerical thinking, literacy, reading and writing, oracy, the ability to hold a conversation. Yes. It's and it's obviously in some ways is the foundation. It's one of the first.
I'm so sorry, I don't get the word exactly.
The word is oracy, ORACY.
Can somebody translate it quickly to me? I'm so sorry. Manfred, do you know the word, or somebody else in German?
Sorry, I can't help you.
Okay, but
I have put it in the chat.
And what's the translation in German? I'm sorry, I have to say it, but
Das weiß ich auch nicht. Das muss ich erst mal gucken.
There may not be translation.
So we have just a little very.
Es ist Redefähigkeit sozusagen.
Okay. Okay, so I got it. I think it's important to have when you talk, say this is a specific word I have to know it also in German. So, okay, now we can go on. Okay.
The word was only invented in about 1969 by I think by a teacher, because he realized that there was an important piece of children's education that was missing, that we're not taught how to have conversations. And what's interesting now, if I know I keep pointing to my book, but if you go to my book, I do have a page on oracy where I look at oracy, and on that page I have maybe 3 embedded videos of schools in the UK teaching oracy skills to children, teaching children how to have conversations. Okay, they are mainly having conversations between themselves and learning certain degree of how to show respect, critical thinking, how to challenge somebody, again in a respectful way. That they've been taught all those skills. And you're right, it'd be interesting to take older children and younger children and have those.
Yes, but I think it's that's what we did in our actual project. We connect them, but the case is not to bring them in contact, but to have a real conversation. Both of the parts has to be interested in the words the other have to say. So I think the first really hard part is to go in really contact and inspiring to yes, to hear. Just I don't know if I can describe what I mean, but it's hard to have the whole intention, the real intention, because they are behind whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and to have you can bring them together in one point. So, but are they hearing it? Are they real into it? I think this is the crispy part.
And I think you're right. It is the crispy part, and it is something I'm not giving a great deal of thought to. So I'm afraid I don't particularly have a good answer to that. But other than to say you're right. I mean, because this is where we need to start is with children, so that by the time they're adults, they have this ability to listen, to pay attention, to show respect, to have the sorts of conversations that we know we badly need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have two raised hands. One is Kai, probably this time a little bit shorter comment, Kai.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, maybe shorter. I try to. I want a little bit support, Franziska. I have a similar question. The problem, first of all, very inspiring talk, and I love it. And I have a huge conversation going on, exactly the same issue with some friends. Okay. But the problem is where we're struggling is what to do if the other side is not willing to share any of these rules. What to do even if they are not interested in a conversation, because you started with a point that we have so many fighting and conflicting parties, and that's definitely true. And I loved your approach, because we would also recommend and like it to do. But what if the other side is totally ignoring anything of this, and it's totally not willing to go for these rules? Do we lose this group totally then, and it is out, and this is the final conflict?
This is something that's I've thought about long and hard over and over again.
Yeah, me too.
I don't have an answer.
I hope that you have one.
No, I mean, I think if somebody really is your enemy and really wants to kill you, I mean, quite literally.
Yeah.
Could you even trust them in a conversation? The fact that they are, again, not having that conversation in good faith, even if they talk to you, would you trust them? Yeah. I don't think you can. I think there's some conversations that you've got to walk away from, or it's not going to happen. I mean, I think if you've got people who are leaning a little bit that way, then clearly a lot of it's about listening rather than telling. Here's something I cut out of that talk to bring it down to 30 minutes. It doesn't quite answer your question, but I just want to bring it up. Go to YouTube and search for street epistemology. Street epistemology. And a gentleman, I think his name is Anthony Magnabasco.
Yeah.
He sets up a little video station on university campuses, and he stops students and he says to them, give me a belief that you're 100% certain of. And then in 5 minutes or so, he gently questions that belief in a very respectful, gentle way, because what he's trying to do is not to get them to change their belief, but to get them to reflect on that belief. And there's maybe 100 videos of such conversations. They are magic. They are absolute magic. Now, the problem is, a lot of people are just going to walk away.
Wonderful. Thank you. David, there's just one option probably. This is the Papal Council, where they have to wait for the white smoke, and they are closed and no food and nothing until they agree on something, you know. So, but Carsten Ames is ready with the second question or third question. Carsten.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, thanks, David, for inspiring talks, plural here. And I would like to make a comment on oracy. So I'm also learning this. If we teach oracy at school, I think it would be a nice idea to teach epistemology in higher education.
Yes.
Because then we get a little bit, we know the difference between beliefs and opinions and science, even if the science thing is bad. But and since we are slowly approaching impossible questions here. I absolutely like the idea. I would phrase it as, if you want to improve in institutions, you have to address the taboos. Yeah, even if this is not a very nice word in some way, but I would phrase it that way. And I absolutely like your ideas, having these impossible conversations, like how can we approach the stuff that we did not approach before in institutions, because obviously this is the thing that is not simple and we should address it. So yeah, I hope I somehow understood that correctly, what you mean by impossible conversations. But I would have a tough question. I mean, not the tough as the one from Kai, but I also like the idea of this Lashon Hara, not speaking bad words about people who are not there. But here comes the question: could you think of any risk of this, or would it be simply a good thing we should all do?
There are risks, and I think Lashon Hara as a concept, in the Jewish tradition, goes back thousands of years, and it's been discussed for thousands of years, from what I gather. And of course, it's like all values. There's always something that will trump it. So something like, thou shalt not kill, unless in defense of yourself. And it's the same Lashon Hara. What they say is, if somebody was going to, I don't know, do something very dangerous, potentially dangerous with another person. So supposing you knew somebody was a serial killer, and your best friend was going on a date with them.
So really tough. So there are boundaries, really tough.
Perfectly okay in that case to say something derogatory about them. So that there's this level, this hierarchy of values or laws, if you will. So yes, there are risks to it, but in general, I think all of us, there's too much gossiping, there's too much evil tongue, there's too much derogatory talk, and we should just try to do a little bit less of it.
Yeah.
If we did that, we would make a big difference.
David, we are in the last 60 seconds of our conversation. We should really meet at 5 o'clock our time in Remo. Christian already posted the link, so you quickly jump over there. It's on me to say thank you, David, for your excellent presentation. I personally learned a lot, and I'm really grateful. I hope we see each other again, and I'm going to check with your website again. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Hope to see you over there in Remo.
I'm going to come in Remo for a while. Yep, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you, all of us, for joining this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manfred. Thank you, everyone.